Hey there, welcome to the Mental Perk podcast. I'm Karla Hutcherson, licensed professional counselor.
And I'm Brandi Mock, entrepreneur, author, and community leader. And we're here to talk about
real people, real issues, and real talk. Welcome back to the Mental Perk. Brandi and I are going to discuss today celebrity mental health. So Brandi and I were talking one day and we were just kind of discussing, we need to kind of bring in and highlight all the different kinds of people that are dealing with mental health issues. Our topic is real people, real issues, real talk, and we want to destigmatize talk about mental health. And what better way to do it than with celebrity platforms?
Yes, I love it.
Yeah, I do too, Brandi. You sound very sexy over there. I like that too.
And then Bradley's wow. Thanks, Bradley.
So, I kind of pulled up a bunch of names that I see in the news all the time, or not all the time, but most recently, I would say, especially since like COVID-19, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm seeing this coming out more where people are actually discussing their mental health issues. And I think it's such a positive thing for mental health care, for people to see that it's not about money. It's not about, celebrity. It's not about this, that other people, it doesn't matter what you have, you can struggle from mental health. It doesn't discriminate.
No, I agree. And I think a lot of it too is, just the fact that these guys they're out there, they're mentors to a lot of younger people, a lot of older people, and they're using their platform for a positive message to mental health and bringing it to the light. And I think that is such a huge deal because, not everybody has that platform, and for them to really hone in and focus that, I think it's very positive.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me that they've put themselves out there, which makes them very vulnerable. But I think that their industry has been really accepting of this. And I think that, the fear previously before COVID was that if I talk about this, I'll be blacklisted, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. But now they're seeing that people are accepting it and the industry is accepting it and it's promoting it. So yeah. I think that's really important.
It's so important.
So some of the people we highlighted, and I thought this was interesting because I never knew it, but Terry Bradshaw.
Yeah.
So he was recently joined, he joined the Jay Glazer Unbreakable podcast, and he started talking about his kind of dark periods throughout his career of depression. And he talked about, his mother had depression, but I think it was within his family, but regardless, you would have never known it. I mean, he's so energetic and charismatic, and you think, oh my gosh, he's got everything in the world, mm-hmm. and then to find out he went through these horrible dark periods, and he talked about how it made him have horrible decisions. Like he made very impulsive decisions, and many times it caused problems in his marriages, so he ended up divorced twice. So
well, I think also too it's important to realize, the stress these guys, the celebrities, are under regardless, just the scrutiny. And, Terry Bradshaw is top notch to me.
Oh, absolutely.
He's just a very good
stand-up
example
guy,
to everybody. He's joyful. But I think that also, too, reminds us that just because you have this persona of being happy-go-lucky, you've got it all, doesn't mean that you're not struggling with something. And it makes you wonder, did he know growing up that depression ran in his family? Or do you think it's something that once he developed it and recognized that he had it, it was something he felt like he needed to bring to the light along with the family history? What do you think?
Absolutely. I feel like it's the fact that he's talking about it, not only is he's a celebrity, but he's an athlete. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times athletes don't talk about this because they fear it will affect their place on the team.
Right.
And for him to say, yeah, I still played very well, mm-hmm. even though I was struggling with this. So that, that helps athletes to understand that maybe it's not about being pulled off the team. It's about, let's get you some help.
Right. And I think also too, you've got to think about football and head injuries.
Yes.
And how do you think that plays into a lot of these players going through depression spells? Do you think it enhances it? Do you think maybe it wasn't there prior to playing football and the head injuries just kind of triggered it? Do you think it could be both?
Well, I think there's a lot of research, and I know a lot of psychiatrists and neurologists are doing research mm-hmm. on this issue, mm-hmm. and there is a correlation between head injuries, multiple head injuries, right. and depression.
Which I think is great because now the NFL's honed in, and high schools even, on, pulling these players out yes. ahead of time or, before it gets to that point because of the head injuries. I think that is so important. And I'm proud that they're listening to it.
Yes,
you
of
know?
course. And I know that they're making, differences in the development of the helmets and
Yes.
things that they're doing to make
Yeah.
the head more protected. And so I think that they're taking a lot of steps to try to help in this area. Another athlete that I would have never guessed had depression, Dorothy Hamill. If
Yeah.
you think about the 1970s and 1980s, and she was America's sweetheart, she was just always this huge smile. Well, she talks about starting in 1993, she was diagnosed with depression, and she talked about it being both on her mom and her dad's side, and especially her mom. And when she was up on the Olympic podium at one point, her mother was sitting in her hotel room and wasn't there for her in those moments. But she, had a lot of a strained relationship with her mother based on the mental health her mom faced. And it wasn't until she had it herself that she really understood her mom's issues. And so that healing is able to take place. But I think that that's just, you just never know who's struggling.
And I think it's interesting that you talk about it, that, you have to sometimes go through that valley to understand someone else's valley they've gone through with depression.
Yes.
And I think that is so important because there's a lot of people out there that don't realize that depression is one, it can be hereditary, but then also too traumatic events like a death or high stress job or these celebrities being exposed to all kinds of madness in their world because they're always in the limelight.
Yes.
How triggering that can be for someone.
Absolutely. There's a lot about depression that's misunderstood. And that's why I just love a lot of these stories and the fact that people are talking about it.
I do too.
And it goes far beyond depression. I mean, we're talking high anxiety. And if we get into some more actresses and actors that are struggling with these issues, I want to highlight anorexia, bulimia, self-harm. And there's a lot of these things going on because, like we said, the pressures of being in the spotlight all the time. You think it's so glamorous and you think it's so wonderful. And I know that these all of these celebrities get so much benefit out of it, but you also don't realize the toll it takes on your mental health.
Oh, I can't imagine. Can't imagine.
Yeah. Brittany Snow, she is, Pitch Perfect? She's one of the stars in Pitch Perfect. So I was just thinking about that, but she also has so many other, things that she's in. She's just a precious person.
She is really cute.
But she really talked about, she's been recently opened up about her battle with anorexia and depression and self-harm. And people misunderstand self-harm. I think at some point when you're in such an episode of depression that you just start to feel numb and you stop feeling things, that's really when self-harm takes place because you just want to feel something. You get so desperate to have some sort of feeling that you turn to something that's physical in order to feel something emotional.
And it's so hard for people to understand that. It's really hard to understand it. At what point do you get to that? And it's just like you said, it's when you just don't feel anything anymore.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and so I think there's a lot of misconceptions about self-harm.
What a lot of people, talking to the professional therapist here, but a lot of people don't realize anorexia plays into mental health disorders.
100%.
Yeah, and a lot of people probably wouldn't think that, right?
Well, there's usually a dual diagnosis. When you have an eating disorder, there's probably some other thing going on, whether it's anxiety, depression, other kinds of mental health issues. It's usually got a dual diagnosis that's associated with it. Yeah, so, anorexia is a big one. And I think, and as we get into some of these other stars, we'll understand that, self-image is multiplied when social media came around, right? Because they're never not being shown somewhere.
Right.
And, you can't just go to the beach with your family and feel like, what, today I'm going to have a cheat day and I'm going to eat whatever I want and I'm going to have this belly going on because I'm a little bloated or whatever.
Right.
They can't have those days because someone's always taking their picture.
No, and then the flip side of that is if they rent out a whole facility just so they can have that piece, you got people griping because they, rented it out. And I'm like, they need their outlet. And if that's their outlet, buy the whole facility. I don't care, whatever gives you that piece.
It also brings me, like I was thinking about even with the Super Bowl and Patrick Mahomes, the game before the Super Bowl, and he had taken his shirt off in the locker room or whatever. And he wasn't like paying attention. He's most one of the athletic people out there. He's in great shape. And it just the way his pants were made his belly look like it was hanging over. He got so much slack for his dad bod, and I'm like, he's a great athlete. He's in great shape. And people were just slamming him for having a dad bod.
There's always going to be haters.
Yeah.
Always.
And so they just never get out of the limelight. So what's some that you have thought of?
Pete Davidson, he suffers from bipolar, and I want to go over this because I think a lot of people talk about depression, but I want to talk to you, the therapist, about specific types of depression. So Pete Davidson talks about suffering from bipolar. So explain to the audience what bipolar is.
Well, I did a little research on Pete Davidson too, because it's a very interesting case because he was originally diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Okay.
But recently, his psychiatrist changed to borderline personality disorder.
Okay.
And a lot of times I think that these two disorders get confused.
They're parallel almost, right?
Yeah, they have some differences, but they can both are going to be categorized by some extreme mood swings, some erratic behaviors, some lows and highs. And so you will see people with borderline being diagnosed with bipolar, or people will say it's either bipolar or borderline. But there are some differences as well. With borderline, you have a fear of abandonment. You have an unsteady sense of self. And you also have unstable relationships. That can happen too with bipolar, but in the borderline personality disorder, that's like a symptom. Like it's almost immediate that you have, these unstable relationships based on the fear of abandonment.
Wow.
So they'll do a lot of things, that are erratic to maintain that sense of connection.
I read that he did a 2020 interview, and he elaborated on, I have to constantly bring myself out of it. I wake up depressed, but now I know my steps. I have to go outside and be in the sun for a little bit or go for a walk. It's all just programming yourself to trick your brain when he hits rock. He talks about how he hits rock bottom a lot.
Yes.
And I think it's important for people to understand, and just like you give your patients therapy tips, what is it that you need to do to get you out of that funk, right? What do you need to do? Is it going outside? Is it making a cup? And I love how you elaborate when we talk to students and stuff about depression.
Yeah.
How you elaborate and say it's small little things, like maybe it's doing your laundry, or maybe it's making a cup of coffee, and people think, well, that's an everyday deal. But for people that suffer from depression,
Exactly.
it's a big deal. I know that whenever I go through my bouts, it takes a mountain for me just to pick out an outfit sometimes.
It does.
It's people don't understand.
Yeah, you have this fog on your brain when you're in a depression. Like you're not even seeing things clearly. You're seeing everything. It's like when you were a kid and you were to look at glaucoma, and they might have you put on these pair of glasses and put Vaseline on it, right? So you're seeing things through the Vaseline and everything's unclear. Well, that's your brain on depression. It's like there's Vaseline over it and you can't see
I
through
live
it.
with glaucoma, so I got Vaseline constantly on my eyes.
So
It's a bad feeling.
It is. And so people understand it's so hard for them to function under that cloud.
It is.
And so every decision is so hard to do. But one of the things you have to do, you have to change your environment. If you're in a dark room and you're in your bed and you're not getting any sun, you have to get out of that place where you feel most comfortable, because you have to stimulate your brain and try to see things a little bit differently.
Now, let me ask you a question, because a lot of people talk about how they don't sleep at night. That plays a big part in depression, does it not?
Yeah, sleep and mood disorders are very highly related. Okay. So sleep is so important to good mental health. Your brain does not function when it is not taken care of. And when we sleep, we restore our brain.
And how many hours a night do you recommend sleeping?
In that varies by age. Sure. And in different states, but I know, our average is 8 hours. So some people function better at 8 hours. And so I think that's kind of the basis that we go by. Some people can do okay on 6 hours, right? Some people need 10 hours. And if your brain's still growing and developing and you're an adolescent or young adult, sometimes you might need more. So it varies, but you really have to focus on getting anywhere from 6 to 10 hours, I would say. Yeah, those are some good questions, but we really have to understand that staying up all night and being on our phones and, trying to get up early after that, all of that takes a toll on our brain health. And especially if we're struggling with mood disorders, it's not something that we really recommend. We really need to focus on good self-care.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about some models, right?
Okay.
Models everyone thinks they have it together. They're beautiful. They're, they've got glamorous lives. They're wearing beautiful clothes. I mean, what could go wrong, right? What could go wrong with that scenario? Well, you got Bella Hadid. she's suffering from depression, anxiety. She's been suffering for a very, very long time, and now she's talking about it. And what she wants to do is make sure that people understand that no two battles are the same. No,
They're not.
Yeah, depression for one person may look totally different for another person. So you cannot make judgments. Like if someone says, I'm depressed, but they're smiling,
Yeah.
well, that's okay.
Yeah, it is fine.
Yeah. And so it doesn't, everyone's walk looks a little bit different. I think Kendall Jenner also struggles. Hers is more social anxiety. You would think like, oh my gosh, she's in front of crowds of people all the time. How can she be struggling with social anxiety? So it's something that
It's
wears
a
on her.
microscope.
Yeah.
She's living in a trail of a ton of other family members that have already been there, done it, and now she's being brought up into this, and she does it so well. But
does.
it's like you said, whenever you're in that limelight, it's like people don't realize that. I know when I get in big social settings, I don't know about you, I get a little nervous.
Yeah.
Like I just get a little, and you can feel the anxiety coming on, and
Yes.
you kind of feel awkward. You're not sure how to socialize with people. I just want someone I know by me, so I don't feel so awkward. I don't do very well walking into a crowd of people I don't know.
Yeah.
What about
and
you?
I think a lot of people suffer with that. I'm kind of like the center of attention at all times, so I could walk.
Of course she is.
But no, I do. I get where that comes from. And I think that what you're describing, happens to a lot of people and they don't really know how to deal with it. So a lot of times they'll avoid. And I think in Kendall's situation, she doesn't get to avoid. Like she has to perform.
Yeah.
And so I think she's come up with rituals through therapy, things that she does to help her really focus on meditation and keeping her mind clear. And I know she does a lot of equine therapy as well. So I think there's a lot of things that she does to help to manage that so that she is more in control of the anxiety and then instead of the anxiety controlling her. So who are some other ones that you came across?
We all know Demi Lovato. She's a big one. She's a huge advocate for mental health education and awareness, and I love that about her because it's so important. And she's such a sweet, I don't know her personally, but I love how she's transparent about her struggles. I know it probably took her a minute to get to that point, but now that she has, I think it's very important that she's using her platform the way she does to educate everybody, and even through her music.
Yeah, I love how she uses her music as a platform.
I do
and,
too.
And I see a lot of people doing that. And people give Taylor Swift a hard time about writing about her life, but in some ways I think that that's her therapy.
I don't know about you, but I can relate to almost every song she writes.
I agree. And
Yeah.
her music is meant to tell her
It is.
story.
It is. And it's funny.
Yes.
And it's serious, but it just allows people to relate.
I was watching some TikTok video or something of her at one point, and she just had piles and piles of journals. So she journals all these things in her life, and she has so many different emotions that she goes through based on her experiences, but she finds a way to turn them into a song. And so I find that has to be her therapy. I don't know. I've never talked to her, but I'm just saying, it seems like that's part of what music is for.
Well, I know with your patients, and I know going through therapy myself, it's so important to journalize because you're able to build off that, and then you're able to go back and reflect on your journey and your growth.
I love that. And that's what I tell my patients is like, even if it's not writing a whole section on the journal, but you might write 3 things I'm going to accomplish today, and you go back at night and you kind of check those off. Well, you go back and look a year later and you see all the check marks in your life and you're like,
It's a good
I
feeling.
have been successful, right?
Yeah.
I've done some things. I've accomplished some things. So I think that's super important.
On Demi, though, I want to go back into her, but she talks about her mother used to be afraid to wake her up in the morning for fear that she'd find her dead. And I think, God, as a mom, I can't imagine. And it says, although Lovato had often struggled, she admitted that she told her fans that you can't get through whatever it is you're going through. You got to rely on other people to help you get through it. And it's a scary thing to think that there are people out there that don't have that support.
Absolutely. And that's what's so important in healing. And here's the deal. We're talking about mental health, but what we know is mental health is so treatable, right? There's so many things that we can do to help mental health. It is not the end. It's not the end all, right?
No.
It's really, if you talk to some of these celebrities, they'll tell you sometimes just getting that diagnosis can take the weight off their shoulders because they're like, okay, now there's a reason. There's something that I can do. And so then to get the treatment and to actually feel better it's a whole new
It
world.
is. It really is.
Breaking through that wall of pain and seeing what's on the other side is so encouraging.
Well, and I remember my doctor telling me a long time ago, like, you function so long with depression, at some point there's a breaking point.
Yes.
And that breaking point can be so hard,
Yes.
but so releasing at the same time. I mean, if you've not been through it, you can't understand it, but going through it, you understand that it is okay, if I can take this pill to keep me from having all these mood swings, and if I can go to therapy and talk about it, people are like, I don't like therapy because, and I'm like, even if you know what the therapist is going to tell you, it's affirmation.
Yeah.
And it's
absolutely.
it's I don't know the word. It's justifying, I guess, the way you feel, and giving you tools to navigate. And I think that's huge.
Yeah, therapy is a great safe space just to process, right? It doesn't have to be, so Freudian where we're laying on a couch and getting all this insight. Sometimes just talking out loud is therapeutic. So it's really about processing it in a safe space with no judgment, and that itself is healing in a lot of ways. But there's a lot of misconceptions out there about what therapists can do for you. And I think it's interesting what you just pointed out is that, your depression may lay dormant in you for a long time. We know it's a medical condition. It may be dormant for a while. And you're dealing with it, and managing. And a single event could be the last straw, the trigger. It's not the cause of the depression, but it kind of activated it.
Oh, yeah.
And woke it up.
Well,
and
and I remember my doctor telling me, he's like, you're almost like, the best way he could explain it, because he was an alcoholic. He said it's like a high-functioning alcoholic. You're able to coast through everything you're going through until it gets to that boiling point, and and then when it does, it rears its head, and you're like, either you get help for it, or it's gonna take its toll on you.
Absolutely. There's so many celebrities that we could highlight, and ones that are in the news. And for many times, people would just go, "Oh, they're crazy. They're falling off the deep end." You can talk about Mariah Carey, Selena Gomez, Britney Spears. And you see this. They're out. They're doing all these wonderful things, and they're like at the top of their career, and then you just see this big pitfall. But when they get help and treatment, you see this come back.
Yeah.
And it's so neat to see, especially the ones that are so open and allow themselves to be vulnerable, and for people to say, yeah, that happened to me, but here I am, and I'm stronger than I ever was. And I was just reading an article with Mariah Carey and how she was like, my whole world is different now.
Right.
Yeah, but she didn't understand what was wrong with her.
Well, and just these guys that come out, these celebrities that come out and talk about it, it almost makes you wonder, man, when people come out of the woodworks like that, and people are starting to communicate with them and going, I know how you feel, I've been there, or they're explaining feelings that these celebrities might be going through, but they don't have a way of articulating it. And it puts that connection there, and it allows the celebrities probably to be able to push forward, but it also allows the people that are following these celebrities and listening to them to be able to navigate through some issues. Now, I want to talk to you about something real quick. I find it frustrating sometimes, and I think as a therapist, maybe you can help me with this, is there are so many people out there that know they have mental health issues, that have the resources to get that help, but they choose not to get the help. How do you walk through someone, a family member that's going through, seeing someone struggling with mental health issues, they've given them resources through counseling or through medication, but that person's just not willing to take on that responsibility? What do you tell the family members that have gone through this for years?
Yeah, that is such a hard situation, Brandi, because the family members have done everything they can to support this person. And a lot of times they end up making it their problem, and it affects their quality of life because they just keep trying and trying and trying. But what we know is change doesn't happen unless you're ready to change.
Right.
And so you can give those people all the resources in the world, but they have to be motivated to change. They have to be motivated to do something different. And at some point, the family members have to give them the space to do that and not take on the responsibility of it, right? So if someone is very much in a mental health crisis and they're a danger to themselves or others, there's lots of things family members can do to go ahead and get them the help that they need. It may be with the help of the court system. And in those situations, if they are not able to think and make decisions on their own, that's the best way to do it, is to go through the legal system and really get them the help that they need. If the person's not a danger to themselves or others, then that's the problem. If they're not saying those words, then it makes it a lot more difficult for the family member to step in and take over the care.
And then what do you tell the family at that point?
That's, again, you have to almost go into a tough love situation, right? You have to. It's kind of like if you were going to throw out a life preserver to someone and they're out there, no, I'm a good swimmer, let someone else have it, let someone else have it. You know?
I love that analogy.
And in this situation, you have to put that life preserver on, right?
Yeah.
And we could even go into the plane situation, like you have to put your mask on before you put your child's on. The family member has to keep themselves afloat. The family member has to keep going. They have to keep living their life, and they can't continue to put the struggles of that person so much in their way that they lose sight of their own reality, right? And so I feel like in those situations, you have to swim or you're going to sink. Yeah,
I love that
and
analogy.
So that's where we have to get families to understand you do the best you can, but you have to maintain your own self-care in those moments. So good questions. You know, I also want to highlight some amazing things that celebrities are doing with mental health awareness. You know, Brandi, you and I got to go to an event here, the Halliburton Foundation put on, remember?
That was so good.
And they had Dak Prescott speaking, and there was another football player too. Didn't get that one written down this time, but amazing. Both of them were amazing. But Dak Prescott talked about his own brother's suicide that happened over the pandemic, but he created a foundation called Faith, Fight, and Finish. But it empowers resilience. It's fostering strength and adversity for individuals, families, and communities. And he's really trying to highlight these issues and the strength and community and support. So it was really good to hear him talk about that and the amazing things that he's doing. Did you find some that you wanted to talk about?
I know Lady Gaga's got one called Born This Way Mental Health Foundation.
Absolutely.
And I love Lady Gaga. I mean,
yes.
How can you not love the woman? But yeah, I mean, and Michael Phelps Talk Space, which is huge.
Yeah, that's a really neat program. They're doing virtual therapy, and it can be through an app or online, and they have programs so that people can get therapy easily, especially if they're not in areas where there's a lot of therapists. So it's something that's really, really important. And I think that John Legend and Emma Watson are also, they also sponsor a Headspace app where you can get some different kinds of mental health care and meditation on an app. So I think those are really good ones.
Miley Cyrus has got one called Happy Hippie.
Yep.
Help for young homeless and LGBTQ in sports. So I think that's pretty cool. Glenn Close, Bring Change to Mind, mental health support for bipolar disorder.
Yeah, I love that too. And I know Mariska Hargitay, the Law and Order, so she has the Joyful Heart Foundation, and she supports survivors of sexual assault violence and child abuse. So that's a really big one. And just there's so many more. I know Gabrielle Wright is big into the Never Alone, which is mental health and suicide prevention. So, and Jewel, I don't know. I love Jewel. Yes. And she talks about her own battles. She was from domestic abuse herself. Her father was an alcoholic. And she kind of left at age 15 and just started to figure out that I could go down the path of my family or I could go through the path of resilience.
Yeah.
And she chose to do that. But she's really into mental health awareness and is co-founder of the Interworld, which is making mental health resources and support available through the virtual world.
And I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she was discovered singing on the streets, was she not? And
Yes,
I think that is so cool because that was probably her therapy.
Yes,
helping
definitely.
her get through it. And she's got such an angelic voice to me.
100%.
So it just her story it's amazing.
It is amazing. But there's so many people that are trying to make a difference. And we can also focus on the ones that lost their life to mental health conditions. And we want to draw attention to those things because it is so sad to see such talented individuals who finally give in to the struggles of mental health. So
And I think it goes back to, and a lot of our listeners, I want to highlight too, Karla, a lot of our listeners don't realize that we're more than just a podcast.
yes,
We're more than just, positive posts on Instagram and Facebook and, TikTok. We also have mental health training that we offer to schools, first responders, parents, corporations. And I think it's so important for people to realize, because we'll get messages every now and then of like, what do you do? Just post positive messages with your pretty faces all the time? And I'm like, no, we're way beyond that. Our
Yes.
goal is to get out there and educate people and bring light to it's okay. And it goes back to us talking about how mental health doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care if you're rich, doesn't care if you're poor, doesn't care if you're pretty, doesn't care if you're an athlete. It doesn't care.
right. And that's the biggest point we're trying to make with all this celebrity initiatives is that it does not discriminate.
It doesn't.
And, until you've walked in someone's walk, you don't understand what they've been through.
Mm-mm.
And even when we talk about losing people like Matthew Perry or Robin Williams or Naomi Judd, we haven't walked their walk. And so many people offered all these different opinions on what happened. And the real issue is they had mental health and they were exposed to so many things, and they tried to make it work, and so many pressures in Hollywood that they just couldn't keep battling. And so we want to raise awareness to that and the help out there that is for people with mental health issues. And the main thing that many of these celebrities want you to understand is you do not have to go through this alone.
You don't.
And I think that in many times the ones that end up taking their lives is because they felt they were so alone.
And no one loved them. No
Yes.
one wanted to hear them. And we talk about that too, especially if you're not open to mental health. People want to put the stigma at a sign of weakness. It's all these things that are negative.
Yeah.
And we just want our listeners to know it's okay to go to someone and talk to them. If you can't talk to a family member, talk to someone that's going to listen to you, because there are plenty of people out there that struggle like you do.
Absolutely. And it's very important for you to know, asking people if they're okay or if they're having thoughts of suicide, it does not put the thoughts in their head. It doesn't. And
The thoughts are there probably already, correct?
They've been there for a while. If
Yeah.
someone gets to the point of making a plan or actually acting on it, those thoughts have been there a very long time. They did not just pop in their head. They've been contemplating that for a very long time. So the fact that you actually ask could save their life.
Yeah, and we've heard those stories.
Yes.
They're so important to hear too. We've heard and seen
Yeah.
those questions, just someone, a stranger, just saying, hey, how are you? Or, hey, making a compliment. You look nice today, because that person didn't feel worthy.
Absolutely. The story of Kevin Hines, he survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. He's an inspirational speaker, but his story will so highlight the need to ask that question. And so I really encourage people to look him up and read his story. It is such an amazing story because he had all of those thoughts and he made the attempt, and he's alive to tell you about it because he had to think about it all the way down.
Yeah.
You know?
I can't even think about that. Like, I can't think about what he was thinking, but there's a reason why he's still here.
Exactly.
And he's taking advantage of that, and that's what I love. He's
Yeah.
educating people.
That is such an important thing. And I also want to point out, Dak Prescott, when we heard him, one thing that really stood out to me when he spoke was he talked about vulnerability being a strength. And I know that you and I have taken that line and put it in our trainings, because I think people are scared to be vulnerable, but it also takes so much courage and strength to be vulnerable.
Oh, and respect. I just respect people that do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's strength in that weakness. And I think that it's important for people to realize that.
Absolutely. Well, we hope you guys have enjoyed talking about mental health, and we really want to highlight and really support all these celebrities that are putting it out there, using their platforms, using their voice, because they are making a difference, and people are now talking about things that they have hidden for so long. So we want to give kudos to all those amazing and strong people out there using their amazing platforms to help people. If you have any questions or thoughts, please reach out to us. We love to come train you, but we also want you to know how important you are, and you are definitely not walking this walk alone.
Never.
If you or anyone you know is struggling with any mental health issues, we want you to reach out to a friend, a trusted family member, somebody you trust. We want you to get connected with a professional. If you are having self-harm thoughts or suicidal thoughts, we want you to get immediate help. Dial 911, go to the nearest ER, or you can call the National Suicide Hotline at 988. We at Mental Perk want you to know you're worthy. We're in this together.